Ogan. Ban presente gwini gi legislatura dan todo lo kui mane kungo gano huzun gi airi. Jaho na antes di datutuhun beogago no na inayit oportunidad gwini za tafanoge adidede masya un minuto da tahasu da taji hi amiguta amigong Guam amigo ni Amerika ni adinguhit nigap man masangonit si General Ben Blas. So please, ladies and gentlemen, before we start, I'd like to ask all of you to please join me in rising for a moment of silence to honor the late General and Congressman, Guam son and native, General Ben Blas. Si Masi todos hamzo. Mangagi pawagin na Ogan para esti ni kinakon ko publiko ni esti na manera siya itariakta ni mapublika hujung tamano ginagagaw ni open government law ni esti gobernota mangagi pawu para ta ekungo ki sentimento ni publiko ni mapunta si Dr. Marilyn Salas, Chamorro Cultural Representative ki Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. Wahalo ko siya per no poni no ni para ta ekungo ki sentimento ni publiko za ni ayan sa siya di man in efekta i bill number 166-32, bill 248-32, bill 203-32 dan bill 244-32. Tatutun tay mano mapublika i tariata i agenda no za tatutuhunit gwinigi para i konfirmasyon na inekungok. Antes di tatutun, zao na beo rekognisa na mingay todo loko gini, i representative itauto, i senador siya, kaya gi mas tsago gi apaga, gi mas tsago gi loko no gini gi si Speaker Judith Wampat, bifyon niya si Senator Frank Aguon, pago gi kagawin na banda, kaya gi si Senator Marilyn, Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Tony Ada dan si Senator Marilyn si Masi todos ni finatan medyo pago na Ogan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. For those of you that are here present at this legislature, as well as those listening in on the airways, as this is being aired for this public hearing, which was announced pursuant to the requirements of the open government law of the government of Guam. We have an agenda this morning that includes a confirmation hearing, plus some bills that have been proposed by members of the legislature. We'll begin with the agenda as published, and we'll start with the confirmation hearing on the nomination of Dr. Marilyn Salas to be the Chamorro Cultural Representative for the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. And we have this morning who have signed up to testify, the nominee herself, who's here, who would like to go ahead and call her up. And we also have Mr. Joe Kinata from the Historic Preservation Agency. So please join us this morning. We'll go ahead and begin with the receipt of testimony by the public representatives, and that will be Mr. Joe Kinata, and then we'll close the nomination hearing by hearing from the nominee herself. So, Mr. Kinata, please make sure you identify yourself for the record, and then proceed with the presentation of your testimony.
Yes, Senators, Chairman, my name is Joseph Kinata. I am the Chief Program Officer of the Guam Preservation Trust. And on behalf of the Guam Preservation Trust, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to testify in favor of Dr. Marilyn Salas' appointment to the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. With her appointment as a member of the Review Board, by public law, she automatically becomes a board member of the Guam Preservation Trust. Dr. Marilyn Salas has contributed to the advancement of historic preservation on Guam through her tenure as board member from October 2003 to May 2013. Her leadership and resource network is invaluable, and we look forward to working with her if appointed. The Guam Preservation Trust has and will continue to support individuals and organizations contributing towards the advancement of historic preservation on Guam. Thank you. Sizus Masi.
Sizus Masi, Mr. Kinata. I also have signed up as members of the public, Mr. Michael Makio. Please join us at the table here, Mike, and Mr. Pete Calvo. Is Pete here? The director of the Guam Energy Office as well. Thank you. Mike, and then Pete.
Good Senator and members of the committee, thank you very much for taking time to listen to our testimony. I'm here today also in support of Dr. Salas' nomination to be a member of the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board representing Chamorro culture. I've had the opportunity to work alongside Dr. Salas for many years now, without dating ourselves. And it's always been a privilege and a pleasure to work with her. She's a very strong advocate for Chamorro culture. She's wonderful at building advocacy and consensus, so especially in culture and heritage preservation. Many times you see people butting heads. You need a diplomat, a voice of reason, and that's what Dr. Salas many times brings to the table. And so she's able to build that consensus, and a lot of projects and programs are able to move forward. She's also always been a very strong advocate of women's roles relative to historic preservation, cultural preservation, and heritage. Her legacy at the University of Guam, she's been a role model for young women for decades. For many weeks now, she's been a role model for, she's only 22 years old. But you talk to a lot of professional women who are involved in cultural and heritage preservation on Guam right now, and they will always point to her and say that she was always a part of building that interest and sustaining that standard of excellence for a lot of women practicing in cultural and heritage preservation. I think we would be, all of us would be very lucky to have another member on the board who brings these talents and the commitment that Dr. Salas brings to our programs. That was it. Thank you.
Identify yourself for the record so that when we...
I'm Michael Blas Makio. I'm the chairman of the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board and the chairman of the Guam Preservation Trust.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Calvo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'd like to throw my support fully behind Marilyn. She's indeed a very beneficial member of this group, having been, excuse me, let me just fall back. My name is Pete Calvo. I'm the Guam Energy Office Director. I was a Director for Parks and Recreation, and I have very good relationship with the historic and preservation review boards, and I really appreciate the services that Marilyn and the others have provided for us. Indeed, their dedication and commitment to the program is beneficial not only to preserving our culture, but to the people of Guam in the future for all of our future generations. And so I'd like to ditto everything that has been mentioned thus far, and indicate that with Marilyn's demeanor, she is indeed a force that looks to ensure that things move forward, and so she's always there making things smooth over if there's any controversy, and she's always providing that ear that listens to both sides, as well as looks for avenues to move the programs forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak on her behalf, and I look forward to her continued support of the programs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calvo. We'll go ahead now and hear from the nominee herself, Dr. Salas.
Senator Pangelinan, Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Retirement, Public Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, and Land. Long title.
Yeah.
And a lot of responsibilities here. Thank you for this opportunity, and I want to thank Mike and Joe and Pete for speaking on my behalf. I'm here to request your support of my confirmation to serve as a Chamorro culture representative on the Guam Historic Preservation Review Board. I left the board 6 months ago and had lots of time to reflect on all the successes, challenges, and new ideas for historic preservation. I miss being with such wonderfully knowledgeable and committed people who focus on the mission of historic preservation. Today I sit before you and ask to serve again, this time as a wiser person who looks at preservation of historic sites and landscapes amidst all the challenges of Guam in 2014 interest by the U.S. military for more of this precious land, and economic growth and development. Our preservation goals include safeguarding the future for younger generations with our cultural, historic, and natural resources, exposing and teaching our young adults the stories of our island's historic sites and landscapes, respect for our ancestors, the mountains, the valleys, the oceans, the rivers, the wells, laddie sites, nunu trees, ancestral burial grounds, Chamorro language, and all the knowledge that these sites and landscapes communicate. In time and more informed of heritage, young adults would develop greater self-esteem, leading to respect for the diversity of people who have made Guam their home. As board members, we are witnessing the eager and renewed interest in preservation through our new staff at Guam Preservation Trust, young and between the ages of 25 to 40. I know that the next bill's coming. One has to do with land for the University of Guam, and I think that is a precious and a valuable thing to do, to be able to support what the University of Guam wants and can use. The Guam Historic Preservation Review Board serves to advise leadership about preservation of historic cultural sites and landscapes. It means advocating for legislation and working with our community to preserve and protect. The year 2014 and beyond are interesting years for historic preservation. If confirmed, I look forward to working with GHRB as Guam moves forward. Thank you for this opportunity to share my interest and excitement.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salas. I'm going to go ahead and recognize members of the panel then to see if they had any comments or questions, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the Speaker of the Legislature, Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salas. I know you've been in the in this commission. Is there anything, you're much wiser, like as you said, earlier. Is there anything new in terms of what you would like to see the preservation actually undertake, or that hasn't been done?
I think what's coming up currently in National Preservation Trust and also Guam's interest is heritage tourism, and I think we're going that way as Guam moves on with like the Plaza de España. Those ideas are coming out. Umatec and the Umatec Foundation's doing something with heritage tourism. The other one is we can protect and preserve all these historic sites, but we also have to know that there's an education to the youth about the importance, because it's easy to just take this boulder away or cut down that nunu tree, but what did it represent, and how do we work around these natural environments? I'm now a farmer, and I have a more of a love for nature and all the things that are there. So there's a lot that nature can teach human beings. How do we then use this? And so it's about training of youth. And as we go, our strategic plans right now show a lot of activities that will encourage the youth to participate in historic preservation.
You've also stated in your testimony, of course, about some of the our indigenous plants on the island. And is there anything, of course, in same line of interest that you have, and your return, of course, to the soil, telling the soil as now a farmer yourself, is that to see how then maybe the promotion of that and working with the Department of Agriculture, maybe other organizations, maybe even our schools, because there's just recently understand that in the there was a conference that was held, and someone was brought out to talk about gardens in our schools as well, community gardens, school gardens, and I mean it's unfortunate that we had to get to this point to realize what we used to do as a people. So do you also see an expansion in terms of what the preservation does, but more importantly what it can do in addition, tying it all in, of course, to our cultural and heritage preservation?
And as you say that, I think about Agriculture and the University of Guam's CNAS, and what they can do to help guide the preservation of lands that have medicinal plants. So at the coastal area, the mountain area, and in the valleys. How do we protect that? Because you can't find all the medicines in one place. So at least we protect something, because Guam and its population growth is going to mean that we might destroy all these. The Suruhanas and Suruhanas that I've talked to from the Northern Marianas, they come here to get some of our plants, and they're recognizing that along Gun Beach they don't see the same medicinal plants, and they're very sad about that. So how do we keep that? Bernie has a garden on the back road on the way to Anderson, and Bernie Nelson. So she's holding it, but it's not in its natural environment as much. How do we keep things in their natural environment and work with it there?
Okay. Thank you. Oh, wait, one more. I know that Speaker Ben had introduced legislation. It passed preserving certain 5 acres, I think, of property to be used exactly for medicinal plants. And is this, again, and it's part of our culture, and it's part of our heritage, and it's just, I'm just looking to see, like you say, other than preserving buildings, brick and mortar, but something else beyond that. Is legislation needed to do this? Is this something the board themselves can do?
I think this is within our mission and our goals. It's not only to protect the sites and the buildings, but also to look at the cultural aspects, the intangible part that could easily disappear. So we have grants within there that could do that. Or we have just programs that would be allowable, and not a grant, but something that we take on as a board.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. I'm going to recognize the other lady on the panel, since Mike certainly put us in that frame of perspective. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Speaker Ben. Dr. Salas.
And I won't scold you or say anything.
Yeah, once is enough. Once in a lifetime is good. Connect the dots. I shall from here on out. Thank you, Speaker Ben. Welcome to your legislature. Thank you for being your Happy New Year. Dr. Salas, thank you for your willingness to serve. And following up on some of the comments that Speaker Wampat raised, do we have a healthy working relationship with GDOE curriculum and instruction to infuse the curricular objectives not only in Chamorro studies, but also in social studies, health, language? Is that an ongoing stream of activity?
We do. And in our strategic plan, we have curriculum. We are also looking at historic preservation scholarships, which will probably come through the University of Guam and GCC. So those are opportunities. The curriculum is, we're always working on like History Day projects that involves the social studies curriculum. So there's many ways. Ron LaGuardia comes to us for support of the Chamorro curriculum and posters that are needed about the birds and the and the flowers and the fruit trees. So those are coming through that way.
Good, because I'm sure Joe Sanchez would be very excited to ensure that there's a energetic partnership. And then how's our working relationship with GVB in helping our visitors understand and respect and acknowledge what we are? Is there a healthy partnership there as well?
There is a very healthy partnership, and there's support from our side to them on all their activities, and vice versa. They will help us on our big things too.
Well, thank you, and I wish you the best, and again, thank you for carving out the time, because I know how busy you are with your newfound passion for farming, and so we the island really very much appreciates. Thank you, Speaker Ben.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Senator Aguon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and Dr. Salas. Thank you very much for once again extending yourself to the community and to the island of Guam. Just to share a perspective, when I first came in 1997, I know that you were a very staunch proponent for cultural preservation and language preservation out of the University of Guam. So it certainly goes back many years in terms of understanding what you've contributed to our island and to our community, and seeing that you can continue to serve in this capacity and lend yourself to the community, and hopefully be able to continue to highlight the culture and the aspects of Guam that many of our younger generation were not exposed to while they were growing up. I think that would be very helpful, especially as it adds to tourism. So I thank you very much for extending yourself to our community, and we look forward to your contribution. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator.
Thank you, Speaker. Dr. Salas, thank you for your willingness to serve again. I think it's important that the board has continuity, and the fact that you had been there and you've seen what you have done in the past and you know where to go going forward is important. But, you know, portions of your testimony struck a chord with me, because we recently had the honor of the ribbon cutting ceremony for the rehabilitation of Plaza de España, and that area played a real important part of my childhood, because that used to be, that at one point in time was a bus depot, and us kids, we used to play in those trees all the time. And I heard that they were thinking of, you know, cutting down the trees because it's ruining the concrete, and that would be sad if we did that, because I mean those trees were really important to a lot of us, you know, for our playground area. But I think that the fact that you'll be serving again is only going to bring more added value to the board, and you have my full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And they did cut down the tree.
But
I'm very disappointed in that. Yeah. I'm glad you saw you know, we should work around those things in your testimony.
I think that they had lots of discussion while I was away.
Yes.
They had lots of discussion. They had to make some critical decisions on this, from recommendations from the board.
Oh man, I had a recommendation.
Yeah. Yes, we played on those trees also.
Yes. Yeah. Senator Duenas and Senator Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I join the chorus, Dr. Salas, in commending you for your willingness to serve. I'm not going to ask you for a position, but I'm going to ask you to please, I know that some of us have worked, particularly Tommy Morrison, Senator Morrison, on a recently introduced bill with regard to the issue of celebrating, like I said, I won't go into details, but celebrating and once again reinvigorating the recognition of our culture and our history. I know that some have a difference about that because of the issue surrounding what happened post bumping into Guam from Magellan. But I would hope that you would take this up as the bill is going to be heard soon, to really, you mentioned discovery, or not discovery, but education of history. And I think that there's been some misunderstanding on what the intention of this bill is. And so I would hope that, I would ask you personally to take that upon yourself with the rest of the board to work with us and educate us more on how we can make the bill better for the true intent, which is to really recognize Chamorros and their resiliency through all those who bumped into our island and now are a part of this huge Guamanian family. So that would be my only request, and you certainly have my support, and I thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you very much. Senator Ada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Salas, thank you for your continued service to the people of Guam, and I look forward to voting on your confirmation, and you have my full support, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator. I've got a couple questions. You're coming back after taking a break. What different perspective will you bring back to the board that you think is going to change the operation of the board? What new perspective do you think you're going to bring back that would change some of the decision-making process, some of the review process that you think needs to be made within the current structure now?
I think it's about collaboration, the partnerships that we can have, because not one agency can do it alone. And I've seen that work with the Department of Chamorro Affairs, Preservation Office, Parks and Recreation, getting together, even in your term. How do we all help to make it the best that we can. So collaboration is important. The other one is really looking at what the national level, what are their topics and their concerns right now. Very different. It could be different from what Guam is going through, but it also could inform us about what kinds of things we look for. We're at a level of preserving historic places and sites, but I think the next step is, what do we do so there's some economic growth in those places? And we've been discussing that. I went to one meeting now. We've been discussing how we can look at the economic benefits of these heritage places now.
In the preservation statutes that have oversight and responsibility over the development of properties and the protection of these historical sites, historical artifacts, and so forth, we have the Guam State Historic Preservation Review Board, which is under the Department of Parks and Recreation, and then the Guam Preservation Trust Board. Now, you talked about collaboration. Do you think that the fact that there's almost, how do I want to call it, the same people are making decisions on these issues, that there needs to be a different perspective from one board versus the other board? And what would your position be on kind of building a little bit of a separation that still allows collaboration, but allows a little bit more clarity with regards to responsibilities, so that we don't end up being incestuous almost with regards to the projects and the authorities and the approvals on these developments?
I think the board that serves for both is okay. We have different specialties within there. We have the planner, the archaeologist, so that's already enough to inform what Guam Preservation needs and what the Historic Preservation Office needs. I believe it's how the leadership, the program officer leads those, that makes the difference. Because this board doesn't have a problem of serving the Guam Preservation Trust and the Historic Preservation Office. So,
have there been conflicts in the past in terms of this preservation versus moving forward on these projects?
I believe it's just about the process of how things get done. Like, the Historic Preservation Office needs some things done, but grants need to come in. Requests needs to come from this office, the Guam Preservation Trust, in order for that to happen. We need to document what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we really reach out to assist. As a chief program officer reaches out to help. Linda sits with us in our meetings. So I think we're going to see more collaboration, especially as we get to the next stage in our strategic plans.
There was a recent grant that was awarded to document the undersea garden of dumping water relics into our oceans. That's how I would put it. It was almost like we endorsed that idea, and now we should embrace the fact that we polluted our waters by dumping these relics, with that. Were you part of that decision in that review of that project?
No, I wasn't.
You were off the board at that time. Again, just the different perspectives that we all have. Cutting the tree down, I think we should have cut the roots that were flowing over to the garden house, instead of cutting the entire tree down. Mm-hmm. Just cut those roots off. I mean, let's dig it up by hand if necessary. That tree is just as important in terms of our history and our culture, preservation, as the garden house almost. And the fact that the solution is, take it all out versus preserve the tree, preserve the garden house. And I think that, my suggestion was you cut those trees on that one side. I think the tree system, root system, we should brought in horticulturists, and if we could have done that, the tree could be supported by the one side of the root system and cut those so that they don't continue to grow and pop up the garden house. Yet, I know there was a lot of discussion, but, and again, it saddened me because I think that, that was the easy way out, maybe. We wanted to do a ribbon cutting, I don't know, and that the tree just stood in the way. And instead of, taking a chisel to try and solve a problem, we took a bulldozer and decided to just ram it off. And I don't know if that's preservation. I don't know if that's cultural sensitivity. I don't know if that's historical preservation. We need to preserve not only the memories, but what created those memories, if at all possible. And instead of preserving what creates those memories, we just decided that we were just going to preserve the memories and people are going to forget.
And that tree carried a lot of history.
I agree.
Through all those times. But also when you look at plants, if you cut those roots, they grow even stronger and move faster. So that's why even with preservation, our plants within the concrete, we have to know how to do that, to take it out, because if you pull it out and there's still some root, it'll damage even more.
Yeah.
So it's about looking at all those, and I am sure that my colleagues looked at the point of, because some wanted to keep it, others didn't, but they had to come to a solution here, problem solved.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sidus Masi, and I want to thank the governor for making this appointment, and we'll certainly do what is necessary to place your nomination before this body for confirmation.
And thank you, and I just want to say, Cito Walter, he's been my support because he gives me another dimension of looking at preservation. When I see where Chamorros are, and then I see where the Chukis group is with it, they're still using the clamshell to pull out the tapioca to clean it, and I'm going, wow, that's our artifact. So thank you, everybody.
That's culture living.
Cultural living.
Thank you very much, Sidus Masi. We'll continue to, of course, receive testimony on all of the items on the agenda, including, of course, the nomination of Dr. Salas. The next bill on the agenda is Bill Number 166, introduced by Speaker Wampat, an act to transfer title of Lot 5397, Municipality of Mingilo, Guam, Barrigada, Guam, Municipality of Barrigada, Guam, to the University of Guam. I have signed up for testimony Dr. Robert Underwood. Welcome, sir. And President of the University of Guam. Before we start, I'd like to give the speaker the opportunity to give us a synopsis of the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Lot number 5397 in the municipality of Barrigada is registered in the name of the government of Guam as owner in fee simple, subject to a reversionary interest of the United States in the event the lot is used for other than its intended purposes, and that particular lot is known as the Cliffline property. In 1966, though, it was approved to establish it as a conservation area, and this area, and it's quoted that this area will be administered and controlled by the College of Guam with the Department of Agriculture, Land Management, and Public Works. But then in Public Law 22-18, that same lot then was listed as reserve land to be managed jointly by the University of Guam, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Parks and Recreation for the Marine Lab expansion, conservation, reserve, and prehistoric site. And this is an area that's it is the most best preserved tract of limestone forest on Guam. So that lot has been in the control of the university, where it has been a biological conservation site for the purpose of advancing the conservation, protection, and study of natural soil and water conditions, and of all native plants, animal, and water life. And the university, of course, in that particular lot also holds the University of Guam Marine Laboratory, the Marine Laboratory Visitors Housing Facility, and Water and Environmental Research Institute, which we know as WERI. So the lot is used extensively by university classes for field trips and by the university faculty in the natural sciences for research, and future plans by the university is to include the continued use of natural features of this lot in education and research, and accommodating constructions of new facilities at the Marine Lab and Weary. So hence, of course, this bill then intends to transfer Lot 5397 to the University of Guam. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Dr. Underwood?
Thank you very much, Senator Pangelinan and members of the committee and members of the legislature, and thank you, Speaker Wampat, for introducing this legislation, and Senator Yamashita for co-sponsoring it. This is, in our estimation, very simple legislation. The lot that's in question is in that whole area that is around the university, and around this there's increasing development. And there's increasing pressure on this property. So I think it would be very useful to have this on the property rolls of the university and to be very strictly adhere to the proposed legislation to keep it as a preserve and as a research area. And the university actually had the opportunity to it was supposed to have been granted this in the 90s in a court action. Unfortunately, the university didn't show up at the court, and so the court ruled that the continuing practice, because prior to this, I discussed this with Director of Parks and Recreation and the Director of Agriculture, and they were in agreement at the time that this would be a good time to move it. And that's basically it.
Thank you very much. Speaker Wampat, did you have any questions? Senator Yamashita, I'll continue. Senator Ada? Senator Duenas? Senator Limtia? Senator Aguon? Oh, you mean I'm the only one who's going to say?
Yeah, well, I was wondering, I was going to be asked about Humatak.
Okay. The recent law that was passed by, I think, this body, if not the previous body, transferred all of the assets and all the property of the University of Guam to the foundation. Am I correct in that?
No.
What was that statute that was for the refinancing?
That's right. So that's just to, we didn't transfer the property. What we did is we enabled the university to take that portion where we're going to build buildings, which includes the Student Services Center. I think that was pretty restricted to that area.
Was it? So it was only to that. So
right.
So all the other properties of the University of Guam it continues to be managed, but it's not now an asset of the foundation.
No.
And this would not move to in any way allow the foundation to have any control over the property and not be restricted by the language of continuing the conservation and preservation of the property.
Absolutely not. That's not our intention. So, but I can see that, I mean, the foundation, of course, we were only using the foundation as a way to deal with the debt ceiling issue in reference to the USDA loan.
Okay. You mentioned that this would allow you to keep on your revenue tracking increases and so forth. If the property is for conservation, how does it allow you to increase your revenue stream?
I think what it does is we just put it on our property rolls, and the assessed valuation of it is added to the overall value of the university.
So it's not through the generation of income from the
we're not,
development of the property?
No.
So no other change in the use of the property is contemplated by the University of Guam with this change in title?
Well, only the area around the Marine Lab and Weary, which is already encroached upon because there's all that housing that's built in that area. So that's only the area there that we're contemplating, because we may need to knock down the Marine Lab, we may need to knock down Weary, we may need to expand those research facilities.
Okay.
That's the only contemplation.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, and those are my questions.
And thank you very much.
Happy New Year. We now now proceed with Bill 248, a bill introduced by myself to appropriate $25,000 from the general fund to allow the government of Guam to pay for an inverse condemnation settlement pursuant to Superior Court of Guam Civil Case Number CV 1158-2. I have signed up to testify Ms. Kathy Focus, Assistant Attorney General, Ms. Georgette Bello Concepcion, and Mr. Joshua Tenorio has presented written testimony on this. And then, of course, Mr. Castro, welcome, sir. All right. We'll go ahead and start with the Attorney General's office and then proceed with the Mr. Castro and his representatives. Kathy, please make sure you identify yourself for the record.
Yes, good morning, Senators. My name is Kat Focus, Assistant AG with the Civil Department at the AG's office. I've been with the office for 4 years, nearly 4 years, but this is my first time before you. So it's my pleasure. We have requested of the Appropriation Committee on behalf of DPW an appropriation for $25,000 to settle a 34-year-old inverse condemnation case, which is currently scheduled for trial for February 12th, 2014. We have a statute on Guam that requires an appropriation by the legislature before the AG and certain agencies, line agencies, can enter a settlement of a case. This is one of those kind of cases. It's an inverse condemnation case. By the way, the statute that requires the appropriation is 1 Guam Code Annotated Section 18201. This is an inverse condemnation case which requires an appropriation. Many of you are aware of eminent domain or condemnation cases, which is when the government goes in and takes someone's land and is required under both the Organic Act and the United States Constitution to pay just compensation. This case is a little different. This is when the property owner comes forward and says, "Government, you took my land and you haven't paid me." So they are the plaintiffs in this case. These property owners have been patiently waiting for over 34 years for some action by the government. Normally, a case this old would be barred by the statute of limitations. But we have a very special inverse condemnation statute on Guam, which tolls the statute of limitations, means it stops it, and it allows this case to come forward. That statute, by the way, is 7 Guam Code Annotated 11311.1. After these property owners went through the administrative level and then eventually filed a complaint in the Superior Court, we met with them and we agree that liability exists. Many years ago, when the government took some land, and I'll allow the property owners to describe exactly where that land is, we took all the neighboring lands and paid the neighbors, and although we took Mr. Castro's land, we never named him on the condemnation complaint. Since we've established that liability exists, the next step is to determine what is just compensation. How much should the government pay the Castros? We've evaluated the exposure for the government should this case proceed to trial. And under the law, the Castros are entitled to the fair market value of the little piece taken, and because this is what's called a partial take, they're also entitled to any damages to the remainder. So we've gone through all those numbers. We looked at the amounts that the people were paid 34 years ago, because that's the value that applies, the value at the time of the taking. If we were to proceed to trial, in addition to just compensation, obviously the government would have its own expert witness fees. We would have to hire an appraiser. We would have to pay for an expert report. And that special statute, which I referred to earlier, also would require the government to pay the property owners 6% interest from the date of take, 1979, till the date that the judgment is paid, which is 34 years of interest at 6% per annum, calculated on simple interest terms. That special statute would also require the government of Guam
to pay the property owner's attorney's fees. So as you can see, should we proceed to trial, the government's exposure in this case gets higher and higher and higher. Therefore, we've worked with the property owners to avoid protracted litigation and have agreed on a settlement amount of $25,000 as just compensation. That amount would include the 6% interest for all those years. It would also include the property owner's counsel's attorney's fees. Very importantly, the director of DPW has agreed to the other taking authority. They agreed to this settlement amount, and they submitted a letter which we provided to the Appropriations Committee stating that they agree on the settlement amount, however, they do not have the funding available, which is why we've come to you today. We are in full support of this and ask that the bill be passed, and I thank you for your time, Senators, unless there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Kat. Ms. Chucha. Make sure the light's on. Identify yourself.
It's my first time testifying before this body, and I've been here longer than Ms. Focus. Yes, my name is Georgette Bello Concepcion. I am in private practice, and I represent the landowners, Mr. and Mrs. Vicente Castro. With me today is my client, Mr. Castro, and we're here, of course, to testify in favor of the bill, and we thank Senator Pangelinan for working with my office and the AG's office in getting this before this body. I wanted Mr. Castro to come today so that you have a face to the name in the bill. So this is Mr. Castro. He and his wife are an elderly couple, and they've been seeking recourse for this what's called inverse condemnation for more than 30 years. They came to me in early 2012, and so I wasn't sure, so I did my research and talking with him, made sure there's no statute of limitations, as Ms. Focus had mentioned, and surprisingly, there was no statute of limitations for anything taken before 1994, I believe. So we filed the Government Claims Act, and so the government has 6 months to act on that, and as expected, the Attorney General's office did nothing. So then after the 6 months had lapsed, then we filed a complaint in Superior Court of Guam. But we have been able to work with the AG's office in agreeing that yes, there's a taking, and so the only question under the law is what is the value of that taking. So Ms. Focus has done an excellent job at explaining how we arrived at the number. My client is willing to do that. Unfortunately, it took this long, and for Mr. Castro to hire an attorney to get this to where it was today. And now we're almost to the end, and so we just ask that you support the bill so that Mr. Castro and his wife can receive the compensation, not that they're asking for, but they're actually entitled to under Guam law. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bello Concepcion. I do want to say that, Mr. Castro, I want to apologize on behalf of this government for not responding to your case. I know we've been working on your case to try and resolve this matter. We actually worked with the Attorney General's office. We had a couple of meetings prior to you filing the case. And my understanding was that we were going to proceed with the payment of it. We had DPW there. We had the Attorney General's. We dug up the old records. We verified the fact that your property was in fact taken without being part of the condemnation process. We had thought originally it was part of the condemnation process. Additional records revealed it was not, and the government just took it. And DPW had assured us that they were going to be able to find the money to make the payment, to settle it. The Attorney General was going to do so. And it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. I know you've went to the Congresswoman's office as well, trying to get some action there.
And then we went up to the Lieutenant Governor.
Yes. And, what we have today, at least, will put that, this kind of mistreatment of its citizens, by this government, by the entire system, not anybody individual. It's not, and nobody said, let's not pay Mr. Castro. The entire system just wasn't able to come together to resolve your problem over the last 34 years. And we attempted to do so. We worked with it, and unfortunately, we weren't able to conclude that administrative process. You have, in fact, exhausted all administrative process, and you have to be exhausted also in terms of that, of course, other than, besides being frustrated. 34 years of just kind of taking a look at that property out there, knowing that everybody else got paid but you, and yet you don't have use of your property. And so with Kat bringing the attention to our office, Georgette, acting to push the issue forward with regards to the legal process, I think this will finally allow us to close this chapter. It's not about the amount. It's not a huge amount of money, considering what we have done to you. But I want to thank you on working with this government, coming to what I agree would be a fair, end to this chapter. And certainly we're going to ask all my colleagues for their support on this. And
Can I say something?
yes, of course. Please,
Okay.
just identify yourself.
You see, my name is Vicente Castro. You see, the problem here is that when they did that in 1979, they identify my lot property, both lot,
Yes.
but they didn't put our name.
I know.
So that's the problem. Another problem here is when I tried applying for a sewer connection, they sent an inspector from GWA.
I think it was still PUAG at the time.
Yeah, at the time. So the problem now is that I guess the reason why the government took that piece of land is because the sewer is right there on the property, private property. They even told me, the guy told me that you can connect your sewer line free. You don't have to apply because you own this because they came into your property. So I guess that's the reason why that things happen like that, And it just take me 30-some years to solve it. I went around, and I guess my only hope and my only best weapon is to hire her, and I know she's going to get paid. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure she appreciates that. So, and I think you made the right decision. She's been very cooperative, on your behalf, and a good advocate for you. So,
For the record, I've not been paid by that.
that's right. Yeah,
I mean, Mr. Penn,
Sure.
Mr. Castro was an elderly man, and being Chamorro and stuff, and so at first I wasn't sure, and actually Public Works or the AG's office, I forget who, initially said there was no taking. So, Mr. Castro felt like he was, oh, are you crazy? And so after a little more meetings with Ms. Focus and someone else from our office, we got to the point where, okay, there's no taking, but at that point we had no choice, but we had already filed a lawsuit. So we just want him to be justly compensated as required by the law. Nothing more, nothing less.
Thank you very much. Speaker Wampat, did you have any comments or questions?
Yes, on behalf of the Guam legislature, of course, and the entire government, we want to apologize to you, Mr. Castro, you and your wife, and I'm just happy, of course, that this final settlement is that you and your wife are still alive to be able to realize this. It's not after the fact, so it for us here, of course, who are not a part of this, it just pains us to hear this actually happening with our own people when we, as a government and a legislature, that we've always gone to the federal government to do the exact same thing, is to ask for just compensation for our lands taken. And I'm glad that the government is setting such an example to be, better, members of our community to correct the wrongs that we've done. So I thank you and your wife and your family for your perseverance, and I'm truly, like I said, on behalf of the legislature, apologize to you as well. So we wish you the best, and thank you, the Attorney General. I love your explanation. When I read the bill, of course, I still didn't understand, but when you walked us through, and I thank you as well for working very closely with the attorney and the families to bring justice to Mr. and Mrs. Castro. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for showing us that the system can work, for helping us understand. I love your voice.
Thank you.
It really helps. But for everybody to come together and the courage, Mr. Castro, for you and your family in reaching out and making sure that things happened. And then for approaching Speaker Ben and saying, we need help in doing this. Because sometimes it's easier just to give up and say, never mind. So, you're teaching us that it might have taken 34 years, but it can work. And so we appreciate that very much. And I too apologize. We shouldn't have had to do it like this. But it is going to work out. So thank you, and Happy New Year. Thank you, Speaker Ben.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Senator Eda?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Senator Duenas? Senator Aguon?
I think, Mr. Castro, you've really stepped forward in regards to trying to address this particular situation. I commend you for doing that. It's just looking at this, and I know that Speaker Pangelinan has been working on land issues for a number of terms now, and this has always been an issue that has been discussed regularly, is how do we get either private property owners or the government of Guam to step in and identify properties that have been not properly condemned, but have been used by the government for public benefit. And by virtue of you stepping forward and recognizing that and pursuing this and seeking the assistance of Georgette and the Attorney General's office, I think is commendable on your part, and I recognize that. I just hope that this would serve as an impetus for other private property owners who have recognized that the government has taken their property for public benefit, and that it's either the government return those properties if it's not being utilized, or ultimately compensate the family owners, because this is 30 years too late, so to speak, in terms of properly compensating you and your family. So I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for allowing the government to use your property for the last 30 years without proper compensation, but hopefully by the passage of this legislation we'll be able to close the books on your property. So I commend you, and thank you for stepping forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, and to Dismasi, Senators. To the Attorney General's office, thank you very much for your presence this morning. Ms. Concepcion Bello, Bello Concepcion, my apologies. And of course, to Mr. Castro, si Dismasi, sir. That will conclude the hearing on Bill 248.
Thank you, Senators.
Yes, sir. We'll proceed with the next bill on the agenda. The next bill on the agenda is introduced by Senator Duenas, which is an act to offer incentives for the purchase of plug-in electric vehicles. We have signed up to testify Mr. Peter Calvo and Mr. Sammy Sotelo. Would those gentlemen come forward? Anybody else that will testify, please come forward. I'm going to give Senator Duenas then an opportunity to give us a synopsis of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the opportunity for this Bill 203 to be heard, and I'll just make some brief remarks in the opening. I'd like to thank everyone for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule. This past October, I introduced Bill 203, which will provide a $7,500 limited tax rebate to any person or business that purchases an electric vehicle. The intent of the bill is to make electric vehicles affordable for our working families and to incentivize and fast-track the Guam community into embracing technology. The bill addresses three key issues that are high on my priority list. The more money we spend on gasoline, the less money we see circulating in the economy. Ultimately, it's our working families and local businesses that suffer. The Guam Power Authority reported earlier this year the cost to plug in, fill up an electric vehicle is about $2.50 per gallon, as opposed to the $5 per gallon gas at the gas station, which is currently on the rise. The more people save at the pump, the more disposable income they have to spend with their families. Ultimately, more money circulates in the island's economy and than the millions of dollars that go off island each year. A family that spends $400 a month on gas will save about half of this if they switch to an electric vehicle. This is an additional $200 more a month for groceries, clothes, and entertainment. I believe that our island, has an opportunity to be transformational towards electric vehicles, and it's very achievable. If the government helps jumpstart it, Bill 203 is a good start. Again, I thank you for your participation today, and I look forward to your testimony and feedback for all of those who have attended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Duenas. We'll go ahead then and receive the public testimony at this time. And we'll start with Mr. Peter Cabo in the order of the sign-up. We also have Mr. Philip Gerling from Nissan Guam as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senator Vicente Pangelinan, members of the August Committee on Appropriations, Public Debt, Legal Affairs, Public Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, and Land. Buenas and half a day. This testimony is in support of Bill 20332, an act to offer incentives for the purchase of plug-in electric vehicles. The Guam Energy Office fully endorses the incentives offered for purchase of electric vehicles. Bill 20332 recognizes the logic of electric vehicle benefits on Guam's roadways and the conservation and environmental impact electric vehicles promote. While the economic benefits in miles per gallon are noted, as Senator Duenas has pointed out, the environmental benefits are also significant. Reducing the amount of petroleum-powered vehicles on our roads reduces Guam's carbon emissions on our environment, promoting a green Guam, and reflects our commitment as a government to protect our land, air, and sea. Bill 20332 embraces the strategic initiatives that the Guam Energy Task Force advocates in the updated Guam Strategic Energy Plan, now before the governor for his endorsement. The Guam Strategic Energy Plan is a product of the research conducted by the Guam Energy Task Force in collaboration with the Department of Interior and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, NREL. As a result of this collaboration, the Guam Energy Task Force adopted the Guam Initial Technical Assessment Report and the Guam Transportation Petroleum Use Reduction Plan contracted by NREL. These primers led to the adoption of the Guam Strategic Energy Plan and the Guam Energy Action Plan, with its 4 implementing initiatives. The Guam Energy Action Plan's 4 actionable strategy initiatives are: 1. Public outreach and energy efficiency and conservation; 2. Demand-side management, conservation, and energy-efficient revolving loan program; 3. Waste-to-energy options; and 4. Transportation options. Bill 20332 enables the implementation of the Guam Energy Action Plan Transportation Option Initiative by facilitating electric vehicles on Guam. Part of the Transportation Option Initiative examines the electric vehicle feasibility through fleet vehicles with the government of Guam, specifically Guam Power Authority and the Department of Public Works. Nevertheless, the benefits are quite evident as is illustrated in Bill 20332's intent, and that is reaffirmed by the Guam Energy Action Plan and the Guam Strategic Action Plan. Title 5, Government Operations, Chapter 5, Guam Procurement Law, Section 123, Motor Vehicles, allows for the purchase of fleet vehicles. We would like to recommend that electric vehicles or hybrids be encouraged for the government fleets. As you may be aware, the Guam Energy Office has conducted a rebate program in the recent past. The Guam Energy Efficiency Appliance Rebate Program offered Energy Star qualified appliance vouchers to the public on December 15, 2010, and completed the release of funds by May 28, 2011, a mere 6 months. It was an overwhelming success, and to this day, we continue to receive calls as to the availability of this greatly popular program benefit. We support the time frame and rebate amount offered, but would like to recommend a household income eligibility requirement to assure an initial success for longer-term results. Our target would be the middle income bracket range based on the USDA designation. With the ability to meet the loan payments and maintenance for the duration of the 36 months, the program would guarantee the full benefit of the EV for the family and visually promote the program for the long term. Upon the initial success, new mechanisms can be put in place to include other income categories. Additionally, assuming that the plug-in capability is installed in the home, it would have to be certified by a qualified person to meet safety requirements, and I confirmed that with Nissan's representative that this is a requirement as well. This should be incorporated into the purchase of the other arrangement to ensure it meets safety standards, and that the Guam Power Authority should be advised of additional load requirements within that home or within the area. I would like to again fully support and endorse this program for electric vehicles. It is something that the Guam Energy Task Force has looked at very seriously with the transportation options, and it's something that we would like to see to fruition. We fully support it and would like to see this go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calvo. Mr. Sotelo?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. My name is Sammy Sotelo, Director of Marketing and Distribution of Atkins Kroll. I'm here in support of the bill, but also we'd like to recommend some inclusions in it with regard to hybrid vehicles. But let me start by thanking Senator Duenas and those that have signed on to the bill to support any incentives for vehicle sales in Guam, especially with regard to fuel-efficient vehicles. As you know, as it was clearly stated earlier, that the more money that people have in their pockets, they can go out and spend, and it generates spending power and the economy. And so that's really, in essence, at the end of the day, what this does. The less money people spend on gasoline, the more they can afford to send children to better schools, or buy clothes, buy foods, and hence the increase in GRT revenues and whatnot. So, with that, whilst the current economic forecast, we're looking at a couple of big things coming up, like the Guam buildup and the China visa waiver program, but they're not in place as of today. But we can do something that's proactive, and one way to do that is incremental sales through hybrid vehicles and electronic vehicles. Whilst the bill in its current format is only addressing electric vehicles, it's our intent to say, hey, that's a great idea, but let's look at the bigger picture with regard to hybrids. It'll help on a bigger scale when it comes to the dollars and cents. Just a case and example, you can get a hybrid nowadays for under $20,000 with 50 miles to the gallon. It's fantastic. And the more you drive by the gasoline station, the more you feel better about yourself. You just don't have to make that pit stop. I think that relates to everybody. And from our standpoint, yeah, we sell cars, but from a business in the community, it's better for the community, and that's our standpoint on it. And there's a lot of benefits of just incentivizing electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles for the community of Guam. So, thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Senators, good morning. My name is Philip Gerling. I'm the General Manager at Nissan. Thank you, Senator Duenas, Rodriguez, Ada, and Morrison for introducing this bill. We are pleased to see that you're pursuing this approach of providing local incentives to customers who are interested in purchasing electric vehicles. Actually, there's 20 states in the U.S. that provide local incentives besides the federal incentives as well. So this is not a unique situation. The intent of your bill is commendable because it recognizes the promise of new technology and that what it holds for the island, and identifies electric vehicles as an emerging technology that is here to stay. It is Nissan Motor Corp in Guam's view that the incentives should not include other technologies such as alternative fossil fuel-powered transportation that have become widely accepted and have been in use for years, of which the most common examples are hybrid gas or electric type vehicles. It is also our view that the legislation could approach the incentive in a more direct way. If the $7,500 incentive proposed in Bill 203-32 is applied to the selling dealer at the time of the sale, It would create an immediate price reduction for the buyer upon purchase of an electric vehicle, instead of waiting till the end of the year when the tax rebate applies. Many families may not even qualify for a $7,500 tax rebate. So if it is applied to the dealer, there's an immediate reduction in cost of the vehicle. The incentive could be applied to the dealer as a credit when filing monthly GRT. Additionally, the proposed incentive would help families on Guam to obtain financing because the purchase amount considered by the financial institution would be immediately reduced by $7,500. In order to maintain the intent of Bill 203-32, it is our view that the 36-month ownership requirement is a reasonable time commitment to validate the incentive. However, we also recognize that practically, vehicle owners on Guam are sometimes transient, or on occasion, family obligations cause island residents to have to relocate to the mainland or elsewhere. Therefore, it is our recommendation to prorate the unexpired portion of the $7,500 incentive for failing to retain ownership for the duration of 36 months. Upon transfer of ownership at a point in time prior to the expiration of the 36 months, the Department of Revenue and Taxation Motor Vehicle Division would collect from the seller of the vehicle the appropriate prorated unexpired balance of the incentive together with the ownership transfer fee. Should you wish to have further discussion on the subject, we will be happy to participate in such. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gerlin. Senator Duenas, did you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony. Just really briefly, because I know we got a lot of more business here to move forward on. I understand your position, Mr. Gerling, and what we're looking at here in working with the bill and having made contact now with several other dealers and the Dealers Association is a tiered approach to this. And one of the things that's been broached is the possibility of the GRT abatement on the hybrids and on other vehicles that are fully electric. In fact, I think you're familiar with even slow-speed vehicles under 40 miles per hour, but are still street legal, that have been brought to our attention. And all of this still continues to dovetail into the idea of the real effort here is, first of all, the economic driver, which is the disposable income, which neutralizes this investment, and then the other part, of course, is the green technology and also behavior. So I guess just one question to you, maybe Sammy and Philippe, in your market analysis, and is it a behavior issue? Because sometimes people with fully electric, they're a little bit leery of it, first off, so that's why the hybrid may be an approach, and another tier, a lower tier, of course, not at this level, but still incentivizing and making it marketable, knowing that a person owning a hybrid would probably be very comfortable then moving on to a fully electrical for their next vehicle.
Yes, there's definitely, Senator, there's definitely a behavioral approach. Many people talk about the full electric vehicle, but many people also have fear of the range of a vehicle and how long it will last on a battery charge and so forth. So it is a new technology. It's not common to the public yet. People are not familiar with it. It's an emerging technology, but it's here to stay. I mean, obviously, Nissan has invested a considerable amount in developing those vehicles. Sales have really started taking off in the mainland U.S. They're moving to commercial vehicles. The British Postal Service has a fleet of NV200, the small vans, full electric, on trial right now. So it's a matter of time until we get them in the U.S. market and then eventually to Guam. So the clean use of the vehicle and the low cost of maintenance. I mean, the only thing the vehicle requires is a rotation of tires twice a year and a battery check to make sure the integrity of the battery, the charging system is working properly. So it's a very low-cost vehicle. It has many benefits, but contrary to the hybrid vehicles that have been in the market for quite a few years and are well accepted, and as colleague from AK just mentioned, you can get into a hybrid vehicle for less than $20,000. That technology is not as affordable on a full electric yet, because it's the beginning of the product life. And so, as you know, early adopters pay higher for the benefits of a new product, and that's what we're dealing with.
Sammy?
Yeah, just to, thank you, Senator. Just to speak on the behavior of consumers on Guam, just out of experience, we've had a number of years, probably in the last 10 years, of just representing hybrids through the Toyota brand on Guam. And Toyota has introduced a technology in the 90s, as a matter of fact, and they're the most experienced. They're selling over 5 million vehicles, hybrid vehicles worldwide. So they know their stuff. As a matter of fact, they're selling their technology to competing brands such as Mazda. They just sold some hybrid technology to that company so they can develop. So it's a very progressive type of technology. And when it comes to the behavior on Guam, we've experienced a number of things. Why would people buy a hybrid? Obviously, it's driven for the MPG, but then you get into the technology of it all. So they introduced this hybrid synergy drive. Well, what is it? What do I do with it? And the fact of the matter is, we've learned that they were scared of that sort of technology. Is it going to get me to where I need to go? Is it reliable? Is it going to cost me more for servicing, etc.? I mean, there's all kinds of the unknowns a few years ago. But the technology these days, as a matter of fact, the application to somebody's lives is so much more easy. In fact, from a dealership standpoint, we make money selling the car, we make money servicing the car. When you own a hybrid, you service it less, hence you spend less, because the less the engine works, the less money you spend on getting it serviced. So the service intervals are less. So what it comes down to is the education of the actual consumer. To put it on an easier term, basically you just get in and drive. Hybrids have the smart touch key system. You just push the button and go. It's really a cool experience if any of you have driven a hybrid, but you press the button and you don't hear an engine like you normally would. Once you get used to that sort of thing, and you just drive as you would normally drive. So it's that discovery phase that we called over the past few years, but now it's more and more acceptable, much more acceptable. I was just making some observations. 2012 to 2013 sales of hybrids. I mean, we sold about 82 vehicles in 2012. In 2013, this is just Prius, we sold 121. And that's not including the Lexus counterparts of the RX and the GS and the CT and the HS and all those for the Lexus line. I didn't count those. But I'm talking for the Joe consumer who just wants a very reliable transportation, that there's nothing to fear, because the hybrid technology is, number one, it's affordable. Like I said, they start right around 20,000. And then the next grade in the Prius line, that's a Prius C, by the way, 50 miles a gallon. The next one is mid-20s of the Prius, and then you get to the bigger ones that are like the Prius V. So, as Senator Duenas had mentioned, it's a great idea to include a tiered approach. Whether it's a GRT abatement or just some sort of GRT reduction from the business, there's no cash out from anybody. But the fact is that when you buy a hybrid, maybe something that's, say it's $20,000, you waive the 4% GRT. Anything, maybe it's $25,000, you waive the GRT plus another maybe $500 to $1,000, maybe anything $26,000 and up, you waive the GRT plus $15,000 incentive. So there's ways to do it, and believe me, those don't sound much up front, but to that consumer in the long run, that is huge. We'll see an incremental. We're not talking about cannibalization, because why would we be here? It's all about incremental monies out there, both sales and into the GRT in other areas to buy clothes and food, as we talked about earlier. But so that's from the behavior point of view. The technology, like I mentioned, it's there, it's easy to drive, and it's just less maintenance. There's nothing to be afraid of. Whilst we do have full plug-in capability with our Prius plug-in and the Chevy Volt, because we also represent the Chevrolet side of things. In the mainland, you get a Chevy Volt for upwards of high 40s. By the time you get it on Guam, because we need to pay that GRT, it's going to be in the 50s.
And even with the $7,500 from the federal, incentive plus what we're doing here, it's not a very affordable technology, but the hybrids are today. So the point is that the technology is already there to help us with this whole effort. And I just ask that you consider to include it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with the committee on and the Vehicle Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very encouraged with Senator Duenas' mention of the tiered approach, because indeed a lot of these things are covered in our strategic energy plan. And I just want to, let you know about our experience with the Prius. Our gas expense we have 2 Priuses. For a whole year, each Prius was just a little bit above $500 for gas. So the gas expense was really reduced, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment on that tier approach when you actually bring it forth. In fact, with the registration fees, we also within the strategic plan, that's one of the areas that we want to touch on, the registration incentives for lower mileage vehicles, as well as anti-idling programs. But I also wanted to add that the Department of Energy has invested a sizable amount of money to improving the technology of battery systems within both motor vehicles as well as PV systems. So the new generation of batteries coming out, we expect to be a lot more efficient and have a lot more capacity.
Pete, $500 versus what?
All I can compare it because we have a van right now. Also, the van was 1,000 plus, 1,004 something like that.
Yeah, but the van's probably a V6 or a V8. Comparable. So what would be the comparable?
It's a small van. It's not a big van, but we just did that analysis just recently, so I can get the details.
Yeah, I know, because you got to compare it to something,
right? I'm comparing it to my expense and with our vehicles
or the mileage travel.
Yeah,
I mean, we got to do that kind of analysis,
right.
And not just throw this number. Oh, yes. It's only $500 a year, but you're driving 2 miles a day.
Yes,
so I think we got to do that. So, Mr. Benavente, did you want to testify on this before we proceed with additional questions? We'll go ahead and receive the additional testimonies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We've been discussing this bill with Senator Duenas, and I just wanted to come and support it, but I also wanted to, while the legislature is looking at the subject of energy saving, we wanted to look at maybe even expanding it a little bit more. We have some departments in the Gulf of Guam have compounds that use these other vehicles to go back and forth in, and maybe we can start by legalizing the use of golf carts, electric golf carts. I don't know if you want to put the same amount of an assistance to buying them, because you were saying $7,500, that buys a golf cart already, so it would be free to us if we get it. But some kind of an incentive. I went to a place in Texas where my daughter lives, and there's a whole town there that almost all the driving is done by electric golf carts, and it works really well. They use it to church, they use it to their golf tournaments, they use it to their store and things like that within the compound. That compound happens to be almost as big as Dedido. So we need to start allowing the usage of things like golf carts in that level. The second thing I wanted to mention was on the side of housing, we're now pushing to get homes built less than $100,000, and in some cases even a lot lower than that. When you start looking at what the monthly payments might be on these meadow buildings and other alternative building systems, your monthly payment might come out to be less than $200, while your power bill is hitting us at $400-500. So what we're saying is that we wanted to look at installing the solar-powered units to our new houses that are being built, but offer some kind of a matching or a grant or something to the new homeowners so that they can afford some of these new systems that are coming up, so that in turn of sustainability, over the years they can come back and be paying a lot less for the power bill, because a lot of that is happening today where people are having to shut down their water and their power because they just can't afford it. So we're trying to find a way to help them, and that's all my testimony is about. Thank you for allowing me this few minutes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benamiki. I'd like to recognize Senator Tom Morrison, who's here and joined us. Speaker Wampat, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Cowell, I know you've mentioned how efficient or successful the appliance rebate program has worked, but that's out of federal dollars that were sent to here. We're not talking about federal dollars here at all. Then the bill actually calls for a totally separate appropriation in addition to your budget to be able to do this. And and of course that's a different matter altogether when we talk about an appropriation. I too would like to see more data in terms of how much you've spent before, how much you're saving now, but then you may have savings with the vehicles, but then your power bill has gone up, and we want to see some of those numbers. Definitely, I agree with you when you talk about behavioral change in your driving, because I saw a big difference because I own a hybrid, and when I don't see that dial go up where I'm actually saving, I immediately would reduce my behavior as well. So that has saved, but my power bill hasn't, of course, changed. I'd like to ask how many of electric vehicles have been brought to Guam or sold on Guam? Can anyone, maybe Mr. Gerling, you can share that with us?
Well, so far we have delivered 4 Leaf full electric vehicles in the market. We have one customer that is currently looking at it. We have about 5 in inventory.
And so in your experience then, is that if it's charged at their homes, that it would be able to maintain its power capacity for how many hours or until the end of the day when they make it home?
Oh yes, basically the charge gives about 93 miles range, but it depends, of course, where you're going, how your driving habits are. As you mentioned yourself, you watch the dial to see how much power, how much fuel you save. It's the same thing in the electric vehicle. You have a little dial that shows you if you're using too much or less. Anytime the vehicle goes downhill, the battery recharges. When you apply the brakes, the brakes recharge the battery as well. So there is the give and take as part of your driving. But reasonably, with air conditioning running and operating a vehicle in normal conditions, anywhere between 60 and 75 miles is a reasonable expectation with our weather conditions.
As more of these vehicles then are brought to the island and sold we've already have seen a company, a bank as a matter of fact, that has set aside certain parking slots for plug-ins.
Correct.
And if we start to see more of these type of vehicles on the island, then I'm sure more businesses will do the exact same things, provide those type of services. But do you, and as a businessman, of course, anticipate that with more plug-ins, would that then somehow negatively impact the power bill of that particular business?
Well, one of our customers owns a business and has put her business completely on solar power. And this is the reason why she came and bought an electric vehicle, because she said, I don't want to pay my GPA bill, I get my power for free, and I don't want to go to the gas pump, I want to get my gas for free. So the possibilities are there. The incentives from the Energy Office exist for solar power improvements to homes. Some of the banks provide financing. Local financial institutions are already talking with some of the providers of photovoltaic systems to finance systems for the home. We have seen schools that and the Archdiocese have invested in solar systems where basically they buy the power at a reduced cost from a company that installs a full system on their facility. So it's just happening now on island. It's a new movement. Hawaii has seen a tremendous impact from solar power, and it has really helped their power companies reduce their investments because there were alternative sources that tie into the grid.
Can you let us know how much does an electric vehicle cost?
The price ranges from about 28 to about 38,000, depending on the equipment and level of trim that you wish with the vehicle. There's a $7,500 federal rebate in place at this time on electric vehicles.
So then, in your testimony, I know you're saying that it might be best to have that channeled through the dealership, therefore bringing it down by $7,500. So if it costs $28,000 minus $7,500, there will be that reduction realized to the consumer. Is there a way in which then the federal rebate could be incorporated as well, so there would be that $15,000 rebate instead?
At this time, the federal rebate is a tax rebate. So if you owe taxes, you can rebate it. Unfortunately, many people on Guam pay taxes, so they may not afford themselves of the federal rebate. That is an issue that is difficult to answer. It's a case-by-case basis. This is why Senator Duenas' bill approach is different. The local incentive could be a GRT reduction or could be an off-the-top of the vehicle price reduction given through the dealer through GRT. And then it has an immediate impact on the purchase cost.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Speaker Wampak. Senator Yamashita, do you have any questions? Senator Toniera? Senator Nuntia? Senator Aguon? Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the I want to thank the panel for their testimony. We're primarily here to discuss the advancement in technology with plug-in cars or vehicles, but I like the open discussion and seeing how we can include this, and I thank the author for allowing the co-sponsor it and seeing how we can encourage our consumers, encourage our people on Guam to look to alternative vehicles or that allow them to save some money. But I through this discussion, I'm hearing new types of, possibly other types of technologies that are possibly on the horizon, and I'm sure maybe there's some information that could be shared that maybe there are some other technologies in the industry that are on the horizon that maybe are maturing already and maybe possibly introduced soon. Is there any information that could be shared since we are this matter that we're looking to now be more inclusive of other technologies out there that are already matured with this bill? But at the same time, I want to know if there's anything out there that's on the horizon that this committee should be aware of that may come sooner or later.
Thank you for the question, Senator. There's all kinds of technology, actually, anywhere from fuel cells to hydrogen to natural gas and all that. But it all comes down to, in today, is the infrastructure. It's a very expensive proposition. There's countries in Asia that have taxis that run on natural gas. It's a different economy. It's a different type of infrastructure. Safety concerns, EPA, they don't have the same regulations. So in speaking just in the sense of our, what we fall under the United States regulations when it comes to vehicles. So there's a lot that's going on in the United States, but the problem is they're running into infrastructure problems. So while it's a great idea to keep on watch, because we're keeping on watch too, our brands are very, very much into, progressing into those, developing the next big thing. But in reference of the impact in today's, times, hybrid is here. Hybrid is a great vehicle, so to speak, to get us to that next great technology. Whether it's full electric or an alternative source, hybrid technology is that technology to get us to the next level. So the more it's out there, the more it's accepted, and the more it's received. Just as an example, on the electric vehicles, there is one company that I know of, I think, Coast 360, that has these terminals. I can't think of another company on island that has it. There may be, I'm just not aware of them. But, we're thinking, boy, don't know how much that cost them. But similar companies will have to make similar investments just to have this infrastructure, which is great. We support that too. But eventually, I think it'll happen. It won't happen overnight, and it won't happen next year, but it'll happen over time. So my point is, the faster and the more the hybrids get out in the community, the more this will be relevant as tabletop discussions for people in their homes. So I hope that helped answer your question.
The Prius, what Prius did you bring in on the early adoption phase, or the early phase?
Boy, number-wise, I really can't tell you, but it was few and far between. It was a tough technology just to get started. This goes for the U.S. as well. It took a while for this really just to comprehend. Like I said, the behavior was, or the perception of the hybrid. Whoa, what does it mean? Is it safe? A lot of it was just the unknowns, but the technology from the first generation Prius to today's Prius is really night and day. From the technology of just the battery itself can last longer, it's stronger, it's more reliable. So, like I said, we've done 121 just in 1 year this year, in 2013 rather. Comparative to what it was in the first years, but it's in maybe a handful. I mean, they sold 4 or 5 in the last 6 months, and so I'm sure it was similar to that when we first started. Yeah.
Plus, it was very ugly.
It was. It's very ugly. Now they have 3 Prius. They're all good looking. But we have Lexus, so those are not ugly.
Savvy, I just want to know, this Senator Morrison said, what's out there on the horizon? I just want to know, is it Ford or GM that's going to buy Tesla?
I don't think Tesla's going to give in. I don't know.
$18 million, that's its market price right now.
They don't want a friend. They don't want it branched out to privateers. They just want to come and do it themselves, and that's...
But Elon Musk wants to go to space too, so...
Yeah. Who knows?
We're trying to justify this. Yeah. Let me just say that this is a very different... What is being offered in the bill is very different than the federal rebate system. I mean, this is a straight out... I don't even want to call it a tax credit. It's just, we're going to pay you $7,500 to buy a car, a fully electric vehicle. I mean, that's the concept here. And I know that there's discussions on other things. And it's supposed to kind of pay for itself. We're trying to justify that it'll pay for itself with the additional income that's freed up in order to be able to reinvest. But you'd have to generate $187,000 of GRT sales to generate $7,500 in GRT income. So if the average savings is going to be $200 a month, that's $2,400 a year times 1.3, which is the multiplier effect. That only generates $80,000 in GRT income. I mean, in GRT gross sales available for disposable income. So it's going to be a really big subsidy. It's not a self-generating, self-paying subsidy due to the increase in income. So it really is a commitment to reducing the carbon footprint that, conservation is not cheap. Saving the environment is not cheap. So for me, that would be the perspective I'd have to look at it, because the numbers just will not work out based on some of the issues that have been presented and some of the economics and costs associated with these vehicles and the savings that pass on to the families and what they will be able to generate in additional GRT and sales in the community. It is going to be a commitment by this government to reducing carbon footprint, saving the environment, lowering global warming and things like that. All of the things that we need to do, it's costly to do, but we have to do. And so I just wanted to make that up front, and I'm glad that there's additional discussion on how are we going to be able to tailor this and make it work. Pete, you mentioned in your testimony that you suggested some income guidelines. Can you give the committee those income guidelines from maybe your current programs on the rebate programs on energy saving devices and things like that?
Actually, Senator, just looking at the prospect of a higher investment for the product and then the length of time, I just wanted to make sure that the program was successful in that targeting the median middle income,
right?
Which I believe I just took a quick look at USDA numbers, and it was between 25,000 and 51,000, which is, I think assures the payments will be made in a timely and prudent manner, and that will guarantee the success of the program, as well as provide for the general public to view that success and benefit and be able to absorb the acceptance of this technology.
Yeah, well, if you're going to suggest any of those income guidelines, we'd like to get them and then the source of those numbers.
Sure.
That would be helpful for the committee and everybody else.
Yes, sir.
To take a look at. And then, of course, as Mr. Gerling mentioned, the federal program is a rebate program, and it reduces your tax liability. And because Guam, most of the taxpayers on Guam receive a refund, they won't be eligible for the rebate. And so there'll be no federal subsidy in this. It'll be almost purely a local subsidy in terms of allowing credits for the purchase of these electric vehicles. I don't have any other questions. I do want to thank everyone. I enjoyed the discussion this morning. I still want to know if GM's going to buy Tesla, because I'm going to buy Tesla stock. So thank you, Sidusmasi, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the testimony. We'll continue to receive testimony, and we have received additional testimony through the email, and all of those will be included and made part of the record here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll proceed with the last bill on the agenda, which is Bill number 244, introduced by Senator Frank Aguon, an act amending Public Law 32-068 relative to withholding tax revenue collections and making appropriations to the Unified Judiciary for law enforcement salary increase implementation. For the record, we, of course, in addition to the public hearing notices that were disseminated to all the media as required by the law, we also sent personal letters inviting testimony from the governor and the lieutenant governor, the Office of the Attorney General, Bureau of Budget and Management Research, Department of Administration, the Office of the Public Auditor, the Mayor's Council, and of course the Chamber and the Judiciary. We have this morning signed up to testify. I have Mr. Phil Tydinko, is he here? Where are you going to testify? I don't see him. Okay. All right. We'll start with, of course, the Chief Justice of the Unified Judiciary of Guam. We have also Mr. Chris Badassi from the Judiciary, Mr. Joshua Tenorio, Mr. Ed Tovis, John Lazama, Perry Taitano, all members of the Judiciary. We'll proceed with the panel then that is up here at this time, and then proceed with any other members of the audience that may wish to present additional testimony. Mr. Chief Justice, good morning, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the
I'm sorry.
committee.
May I have Senator Aguon just give a brief synopsis of the bill?
Okay.
Thank you, and my apologies, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And first of all, thank you very much for entertaining this particular measure at this time before your committee. I also would like to extend my appreciation to Senator San Nicolas as well as Senator Vespicio, who have co-sponsored this legislation. I know that, we all know that in December, the law enforcement remaining balance of 20% was implemented across the board to the executive branch law enforcement personnel. And in this particular case, it was not applicable, the funding that was identified at that time was not applicable to cover the judiciary. And based on communication between the Chief Justice as well as the incumbent Commander-in-Chief or the Chief Executive, in that particular case, there was communication that perhaps the route to take in terms of getting additional resources would be through the legislative body. Mr. Speaker, obviously you're very much in tune with finances, and there's no need for me to extrapolate some of the numbers in here in terms of how the legislation came about with this, but just so that I can just briefly explain to our colleagues here in terms of where the numbers originated from, because it wasn't just an arbitrary figure that was thrown out. If you take a look at the retroactive pay that was provided by the executive branch of approximately, they highlighted $10 million that was being distributed to all law enforcement, inclusive of those who were no longer in the system. I took a conservative figure of 7.6 rather than the 10. It was reduced down to that particular level, and based on that lump sum payment to our law enforcement officers, that would translate into approximately $1.9 million in unanticipated additional withholding taxes at a rate of 25%. The same concept applies, Mr. Speaker, in this case to the judiciary, who were able to remit a similar amount of about $1.3 million, and that would equate to withholding taxes just based on those lump sum payments of $340,000, which adds up to about 2.2. But then if you project the application of the remaining balance of Public Law 29, that's 105, the 20%, you're looking at, just with the executive branch alone, 989 law enforcement personnel, a salary with adjustment of about totaling $6 million. That would equate to approximately $1.5 million in terms of withholding taxes just on that incremental pay adjustment. And then likewise with the Judiciary of Guam, in their particular case, there was a commitment made, and we're going to hear from the Chief Justice, that in fact he was going to apply the same concept to the law enforcement, the marshals, as well as the probation officers, and he did effectuate that as of I believe a couple weeks ago. And that would absorb approximately the $900,000 that's being requested here for the judiciary, and that would result in withholding taxes of about $200,000. So collectively, if we're looking at the lump sum payments, the retroactive payments for a couple of years, that would, plus the prospective application of the 20% pay adjustment, that would add up to approximately $3.9 million. The way the legislation presents this is the revenue base was adjusted accordingly based on those calculations, and then because the tax refund component, there's legislation, Mr. Speaker, that you have sponsored, that also encourages the legislature and the government of Guam to set aside certain amount of additional proceeds. There was $1.2 million that was allocated to the tax refund payment fund, and then the remaining balance of the remaining balance, $900,000, was allocated specifically to address the law enforcement prospective payment for the balance of this fiscal year. And it does not address any other obligations that this government still has to the Judiciary of Guam. And we know that obviously the executive branch is still looking at projecting to pay the additional, when funds become available, the additional 50%, which may amount to about $10 million within the balance of this fiscal year. And likewise, that's an obligation that this committee and this legislature may have to deal with in a separate matter with the judiciary as they try to identify resources in that respect. But I certainly hope that I presented it, Mr. Speaker, in light of how the numbers were identified, and I certainly respect the chief executive when he came out with that statement, but we're looking at resources that initially were not calculated into the fiscal year budget, and these pay adjustments as well as the direct payment for retroactive pay certainly would result in additional withholding taxes that would be remitted to this government so that we can apply it accordingly, and in this case we're looking at applying $900,000 to take care of the judiciary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, and to dismiss Senator Aguon. Mr. Chief Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Hafaday, and good morning. At the outset, let me just state for the record that my name is Philip Carbolito. I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Guam. And if you will permit me to introduce the employees of the judiciary that are around this table, I'll start with Mr. John Lizama to my far left, who's our Chief Probation Officer, Mr. Ed Chovas, the Marshal of the Courts, Mr. Perry Titano, the Administrator of the Courts, Mr. Chris Badassi, our Controller, and Mr. Josh Tenorio, who's our Director of Policy Planning, Community and Media Relations. Senator Aguon pretty much presented our testimonies, but if you will permit us to make our case for the record, we very much appreciate it. At the outset, we want to thank Senator Aguon, our Oversight Chair, as well as Senator San Nicolas and Respicio for introducing this bill. And we want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Pangelinan, for promptly scheduling a public hearing that allows us to present our testimonies in support of this bill. Really, in a nutshell, the rationale why this bill should be supported is not complicated. The Guam legislature mandated a 40% adjustment to the law enforcement of all government of Guam employees in terms of paying this out over a period of time in increments of 10% over 4 years. This was done in 2009. Initially, the legislature made an initial appropriation when this was first passed to fund the first 10%. There's been some disagreements in terms of the continuing funding of the subsequent increments, but the bottom line is that the Guam judiciary was able to fund going forward the first and second increment of this 40% adjustment, but was not able to make the back pays of the amounts that had accumulated as a result of not making the timely payments when they were mandated. In December of 2013, as a result of the various austerity measures that the judiciary had practiced over the years, the release by the governor of certain prior year allotments, and the tools that Chairman Pangelinan, under your leadership, that you have provided the judiciary in the current Budget Act, we were able to pay down towards this obligations that were owed to our law enforcement officers, and we made a payment of $1.8 million in terms of these collective tools that that's been made available to us. This took care, as Senator Aguon has summarized, the back pay from 2009 to 2012 in terms of prior year obligations. 2013 remains outstanding to the tune of, it's stated in my written testimony, if I'm not mistaken, about $1.3 million. What's at issue before this committee this morning is the sum of $900,000 to fund the full 40% adjustment going forward in terms of the same time period that the governor has announced that for the implementation of the full 40% for the executive branch employees. And that pretty much is the period from the last pay period in December to the end of the fiscal year. our current level of expenditure, if we did not receive an infusion of the $900,000, then we have to make certain adjustments at the end of the fiscal year, because we will have a deficiency of $900,000 at our current level of expenditure. The governor has announced that all the law enforcement officers of the executive branch are to be fully paid, and he has made a down payment towards the arrears, and he intends to make full payment, as I understand it, toward the end of the fiscal year. In addition, he has fully implemented the 40%, and so I did not feel that we could continue the disparity in terms of the full 40% implementation. All we're asking before this committee is for parity, for equality, and to carry out the mandate of this legislature. Now, the governor, and when we had requested, for us to be included in the payment as announced, advised that while he supports the full implementation and across the board to all government of Guam employees, including the judiciary, that the judiciary must fend for itself in terms of finding the funds. Now, as you are all fully aware, the judiciary does not have the power of the purse string, nor do we control the disbursement of the collections from the revenues of the government of Guam. We are dependent on the legislature and the governor for our operational revenue. And Bill 244 is intended to fulfill that dependency. And in summary, I just would like to say that all it does is it brings parity and equity, and recognizes that the law enforcement officers, the marshals and the probation officers of the judiciary are equally entitled. If you're going to pay their counterparts in the executive branch the full mandate of what this legislature has instructed, then we should all be included. All the employees of the judiciary should be included. Now, Senator Aguon has testified just in terms of that these are real dollars, because there's been some sentiments expressed that maybe this is not actual revenue that may be available. Now, Mr. Chris Badassi is in a better position to comment on that and echo the sentiments of Senator Aguon, and so I will ask him to do that following my testimony. And in summary, we ask you, Mr. Chairman, and members of this committee, to support what is contained in Bill 244 to bring equity and parity to the law enforcement officers of the Guam judiciary, and we look forward to the favorable support of the entire Guam legislature. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you this morning, before this committee this morning.
Thank you, and Mr. Chief Justice.
Mr. Badassi. Of course. Before he testifies, I would just like to just add one additional point, and that is my chamber assistant, in her usual efficiency, has presented our testimony in certain folders that has been distributed. Now, these are recycled folders, and if at the end of the process you don't have need for these folders, we'd like to ask them back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if we give them back to you, can we reduce the appropriation? Mr. Badassi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Senators Morrison, Aguon, Muntiaco, Duenas, Ada, and Yamashita. I just have a brief written testimony that I'll read. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 244. The Judiciary Guam implemented the final two 10% increments for our law enforcement personnel at the same time as the executive branch. The effect of implementing these final increments mandated by Public Law 29105 without an additional appropriation of $900,000 during this fiscal year will result in a budgetary shortfall, requiring the judiciary to most likely reduce hours of operations in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year in order to stay within the existing appropriation levels provided in the current fiscal year 14 Budget Act. During my tenure as the chairman of the Special Accounting Service, the Bureau of Budget Management Research has presented and represented that its general fund revenue projection model uses a 3-year moving average of historical collection data. The retroactive payments and the 20% pay increments to the law enforcement personnel government-wide represents increased wages to all the government of Guam employees that was not part of the 3-year historical average used to formulate the fiscal 14 revenue projections, nor was it in the expenditure plan in the 2014 Budget Act. So therefore, I agree and support both the retroactive payments and the prospective salary increases to all the government law enforcement personnel represent a significant and tangible increase in the withholding tax revenue collections that would justify amending the adopted revenues in the current fiscal 14 Budget Act. The additional withholding taxes generated and paid by judiciary, marshal, and probation employees from their retroactive payments and the prospective 20% salary increase is approximately $600,000, or 2/3 of what we're asking for to cover the personnel cost remaining for this fiscal year in order to comply with fully implementing Public Law 29105. So therefore, we ask that you support this bill, and hopefully we can get that $900,000. And if you have any additional revenues for our retroactive, we currently owe about $1.5 million for fiscal 13 and the first 5 pay periods of fiscal 14. So that's approximately 1.5. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badassi. Any other members going to present testimony? Mr. Chief Justice.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Joshua Tenorio from the court. I just wanted to make a point about the retroactive pay of the $1.5 million owed to our law enforcement officers. We know that the governor will pay this amount. Well, it's likely the governor will pay this amount before the end of the fiscal year.
You mean before the end of the election?
It might be the same time. You know, when one group of employees that's entitled to the same pay gets paid and another doesn't, it does create problems. You know, although our marshals and probation officers are excellent professionals, I don't think that we want to be in a situation where their brothers and sisters in the executive branch, the policemen, customs, and firemen are being paid you know, what they're entitled to without the rest of them getting paid. It really causes a problem. It will cause problems in productivity, and it causes problems amongst the branches and amongst the law enforcement agencies. And so I just hope that as you consider to deliberate, or as you continue to deliberate on this matter, that we recognize that there needs to be equity in the process, and that these law enforcement officers shouldn't be penalized for working for the branch that doesn't control the purse strings, and that their role in the public safety infrastructure is just as important as the others in the executive branch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. Tess. Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Senators. My name is Edward Solvis. I'm the Chief Marshal. We're here to ask for your support for Bill 244. Listening to your testimony, listening to the other session earlier, you made mention to you must have something to compare with. All the other law enforcement agencies, it's apparent we're comparing ourselves with them, and we're not being treated fairly as far as equity is concerned. So that's all we're here for, to ask your support, and we would really appreciate it in advance. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Azam. I'm the Chief Probation Officer, and we are here to support the bill. One of the things I'd like to highlight is the fact that it's not only myself as the Chief Probation Officer, but we actually have our probation officers behind us. It affects their families, it affects them, and it affects their families. It also we just want what's fair and equal to everyone. And so we actually have the probation officers that have come forward and said they wanted to be here in support of the bill. We actually have probation officers who are working that have expressed an interest as upon my return and the deputy's return to give them basically a highlight what happened in this hearing, because it does affect them and it does affect their families. In addition, the probation officers, approximately 52 probation officers have signed a letter here that I would submit advising you, this committee, that they're in support of the bill, Bill 244. And we just like to thank you for this opportunity. We know it's trying times in the government when it comes to finances, but your consideration of this bill in support of the probation officers is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lozama. Mr. Taitano, were you going to present any testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senators. We really appreciate this opportunity to come before you. Everything has been said that needs to be said. I just want to add that, we continue to provide services beyond our mandate. We provide services to the community, to other law enforcement agencies of the resources that we have. And in terms of maximizing what we have, the court has done that. And I just ask that that support be reflective of the fact that the courts continue to provide beyond what is required of it in terms of its mandate, and the fact that they actually perform that their caseload exceeds national averages, and yet they still perform beyond that. And so I just ask for that support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Aguon, did you have any comments or questions to the panel?
I just want to thank you all for your presence today, and certainly the request for additional funding. I think that perhaps from this perspective, it's a reminder of how the process sometimes has to work, and that is recognizing that if in fact the resources are not able to be identified in the executive branch, and certainly we may have to come back to this body and make sure that these financial obligations are addressed. So I certainly hope that with the support of the good chairman, Speaker Pangelinan, as well as my colleagues, that we'll be able to see the eventual passage of this. And let me just close with this, Mr. Speaker, if I may. I know that just on a slight note, separate note, Perry, you've done an excellent job at the judiciary of Guam, and this is not your sayonara, but this is your probably your last public presentation for the judiciary. So I just would like to personally extend the committee's appreciation, and I'm sure the members of the body, for all your efforts at the judiciary. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Yamashita, Senator Ada, Senator Duenas, Senator Limtiaco, Senator Morrison. Okay. Well, let me just ask a couple questions. As you mentioned, the finances of the government of Guam, judiciary is dependent upon the collections of the general fund in order to fund its operations through the appropriations granted by this legislative body. And we're trying to say that we can fund this because of the additional tax increases that we'll collect due to the additional increase in the wages. Now, Mr. Badassi, what do you anticipate the cost of I know you anticipate the cost of for the judiciary, but since you've had an opportunity to look at the GovGuam budget from the general fund, the holistic approach to it, the cost of the 40%, full implementation of 40% in terms of salaries to the GovGuam payroll, what do you estimate that number to be?
Since the original base salary increase of 2008?
Right.
I believe some of the estimates were in the neighborhood of upwards of 40 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and so the additional 20% for the full implementation now, what would that add to the GovGuam payroll?
Well, currently right now, I believe the 30 and 40%, last estimate we looked at was somewhere in the, when I was back in the committee, I think it was in the neighborhood of 14 million, not including benefits.
Right. So 14 million in additional payroll costs, and if we kind of do the same kind of calculations here, would generate additional amount in taxes from withholding taxes.
You figure 25% of the wages earned.
Right. So the increase in revenue created by the increase in salary is still short of what is necessary to pay it.
Correct.
Correct. So it'd still be running a deficit. So we'd run a deficit in the general fund, and we'd run a deficit in the judiciary. And so that's the challenge that we have. And that's why we've depended or have to depend on the administration in terms of they have the more complete information in terms of how are they going to find the difference between the $14 million total cost of the full implementation, the additional payroll cost for the last 20%, that $14 million in additional, when we're only going to generate an additional $3 million, $4 million in taxes. So we're still, that's why we need to look at this from the wider perspective in terms of what the governor's doing. I understand the governor's just announced, or DOA's just said they're not going to pay the Attorney General's office. They had thought originally that they were going to absorb that cost as part of the executive branch pay, but just received some notice that they're not going to do it. So now we've got to find the additional money for the Attorney General's office. So what the governor's doing here is he's taking all the revenues that are being generated by the additional withholding tax generated and reserving it for his executive branch and leaving nothing for anybody else. And but even doing that, he's still going to be challenged, and this government and this legislature is going to be challenged to finding that additional resource in cutting somewhere else in order to make this the difference between the $3 million and $4 million we collect and the $10 million that we're short to continue paying this. So it's a big challenge. We're going to ask Mr. Badassi to come back to the office to help us meet that challenge. And then maybe we'll be able to do it. But I just wanted to point that out because as you very well recognize, maybe we might need the help of the judiciary in terms of prodding the administration through any kind of legal process to treat everybody equitably and fairly in this whole process. And I think that has been the objective of this legislature, that the implementation of that. We made sure, for example, in the Hay study authorization. Now the governor's saying, in addition to doing this, he's going to implement a Hay study when we're going to be $10 million short already. But he's going to do the Hay study. But in the Hay study, in the authorization granted by this legislative body, we thought the governor was going to be fair and equal to everyone. We felt that he was the governor of the people of Guam, the head of the government of Guam, which includes the judiciary, and that he would treat everybody fairly and equitably. And we know that his last decisions, he hasn't done that. That he's left everybody else to fend for themselves, and which has resulted in the disparity and the inequity that's been created now in the pay for these personnel. But in the Hay study, we said that if he's going to implement the Hay study, that it be prorated so that every branch of this government, every employee that deserves to be paid, if we have $1, he's not going to be able to take that entire dollar and just pay it all to the executive branch, that he's going to have to give a percentage of that to the judiciary, a percentage of that to the legislature, and to the other instrumentalities of this government. So we've kind of corralled him on that, we think, on that issue, that he's not going to be able to implement the Hay study and create any disparity in its implementation. Unfortunately, we have to do that by statute because we can't depend on just his goodness and goodwill to do it for every other program on this, and so that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're challenged with. We want to thank you. We recognize the dilemma that the judiciary is in, its desire to ensure that it treats its people fairly and equitably and gives them what is due. We have the challenge to try and provide the resources to make sure that happens, and this attempt in this bill is an attempt to do that, and we'll continue to look at it, work with it, and see what we can do in order to make sure that the resources are provided to the judiciary to close that inequity and close that gap. So there have been no other testimony and no other comments, I'd like to thank you for your presence and give you a chance to make some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I recognize the shortcomings just in terms of the revenue estimates. I would like to say, though, just in that regard, that at the time the revenue projections were made, and maybe I'm just not understanding it properly, there was a definitive amount that was estimated, and I assume that the governor was making his decision to make the additional payments based on that fixed sum that was estimated at the onset. I don't know necessarily that he had included, the 10 million that's going to be paid out to the law enforcement officers of the executive branch, and the additional 1.8 million that we have paid out in reference to our law enforcement officers. And so, but I will leave it up to your capable hands to make the determination whether or not there is additional revenue or not, we are heartened that the members of the legislature recognize that all law enforcement officers should be treated equally. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and that's why we sent personal letters of invitation to the governor and his administration and his financial team to come and make that presentation, hoping to get a clearer picture of the decision-making process and the numbers that they had used in order to justify the ability to add that additional cost to the Guam payroll, which was also not reflected on the expenditure side. So we still remain hopeful that he'll cooperate with this legislature and the judiciary and provide us with the testimony needed in order for us to make the best decision we can in moving forward in terms of providing the resources to the judiciary. So thank you, Sidus Masi. There being no further public comment, any other members of the audience that are here that want to provide testimony will certainly provide you an opportunity. If there's no other ones, would like to thank you very much for your presence this morning, and the committee will of course continue to keep the record open for the receipt of public comments on all of the bills and the confirmation submitted this morning. You can send them to senbanp@guam.net or office@guam.net. You may also submit them to here at the legislature, to the mail room here, and we'll make sure we get it. So ladies and gentlemen, there being no further business before the committee this morning, we now declare this public hearing adjourned. Sidus Masi todos.